Today, aviation expert Carla da Silva, former Air Mauritius Regional Manager, Africa and Latin America, as well as chairperson of the Board of Airline Representatives for South Africa, joins us to chat a little bit about incentives, trade partnerships, and Johannesburg's hub status. Hi, Carla. So, after a brief break from travel, Carla is making her way back to the industry. Incentives, customers, trade. Can you quantify the benefits of kids fly free type promotions? What percentage of airline sales come through trade partnerships? Building those sort of relationships.
They add value. I think partners are looking for value, and so is the consumer, the travel buyers. So value propositions that include incentives, promotions, value adds that offer value to the customer, the end user, and to the trade, I think will continue to play a role, perhaps in a different sphere. I think it's very important to know that the buying processes have changed, and airlines need to demonstrate a sound understanding of the customer and even the trade partners' businesses, and have ideas on how they can develop or help and improve by bringing unique insights and perspectives to their business. I think a responsive, value-added approach and becoming a trusted advisor is key, especially in the current climate. I think it's important to put proposals forward in the language of the buyers and the trade. And also we need to offer value and incentives to our customers, because by the consumer and the trade perceiving that value and putting it out there, it will ultimately translate into revenue generation. So it needs to be value adding, it needs to be win-win. And I'll give you an example. The Travel Smart program that I had launched together with our travel partners many years ago when I was at Air Mauritius created a solution to the low seasonality challenges and enhanced the value proposition from the trade to the customer. And customers saw that value, and we saw the numbers, the passenger numbers, the revenue generation of traveling during the low season months to Mauritius, not only from a savings perspective. I think they were more interested in the benefits attached to the program, which incentivized them to travel. And I mean, it's good to talk about these success stories, because we can talk to how it generated incremental revenue, addressed the load factors during these periods that was so problematic. And also the program became the leisure value proposition for the trade to Mauritius out of South Africa. And it delivered 70% revenue generation during these specific low months. So it is important to adapt to the new needs from the buyers and to really create inspiring and innovative value propositions that talks to the trade and, of course, ultimately the consumer. Just in terms of the percentage of sales that you refer to, so the percentage of airline sales via the travel trade in South Africa still accounts between 60 and 80% of the airline sales, and it really is dependent on the airline. It's very much still dependent through the trade as a very effective distribution channel, so that is absolutely correct. The direct sales channels, depending on the airline, also vary, but generally the statistics are between 20 and 40%.
What three things do you feel make or break the often thorny relationship between trade and airlines, and how can this be improved?
Absolutely. So over the years, I've certainly seen it. It's always been a big bone of contingency, a lot of uncertainty, and I think the trade at times feel it's almost as if we're competing with them as the airline industry, but it's really not the case. I mean, it is another distribution channel, and I think the way to address it, certainly what I've done, and I've seen that it really has worked, is just having conversations and being transparent and fixing those challenges, finding a win-win. And I think the lack of conversation, transparency from an airline's perspective in this very difficult subject that we don't like to address, I think is what creates a lot of that uncertainty around the subject matter. And I think it's just important to sit down with your partners and explain that the online or the direct channel is another distribution channel of the airline, and that airlines need to address cost and also ultimately diversify its distribution channels. So it really is the diversification in order for us to be able to sustain the airline, in order for us to be able to survive and to manage that P&L, generate revenue. It comes from all these distribution and customer channels. So it really is about sitting down, explaining what the costs are attached to the GDSs that airlines pay, commissions, etc. And it's about having those opened, as I said, relationships and adding perspective and understanding, helping the partners understand the real business impact and finding solutions. And we've seen it. Technology has played a vital role in this regard. There's lots of API integrations, there's technology solutions that have really aided to try and breach this or bridge the challenge in this regard. So I think it is about just sitting down, finding win-win, looking at ways to work together and to transparently say, look, these are the challenges in my business, and our partners have their own challenges, and how do we address it? And I think that our captains of the industry in the travel sector have, they've really earned their stripes in terms of experience and expertise, and they've got a bird's eye view, they've got helicopter views. They understand that, we have challenges and we need to just work together to find a solution.
Something to consider. We're talking about the future of travel. When we look at expanding services between Johannesburg, what are some of the challenges you associate with growing routes out of Cape Town and Durban? And how can airlines and stakeholders work together on this?
Absolutely. So that's a very interesting question. And I think that when we sit with head offices from an airline perspective to really motivate and put forward paperwork that talks to the economies and it's economically viable, let's fly here, let's expand here because competitors are doing it, and we want to have reach, we want to have footprint. And of course, we make money by having the right schedules and frequencies, and it is a very challenging subject matter. And I think in this current climate, more so, and I talked to, when we were looking at, when I was still at Mauritius, looking at which routes do we restart, when do we restart, and by looking at the economies, is it economically viable, and what are the factors? It's a big challenge. Expanding services beyond Johannesburg. I mean, Johannesburg is known as the economic powerhouse of South Africa. And I think in this challenging time, I think airlines feel a little bit more comfortable flying to this hub because they know that the customer channels, the distribution channels, are based here. I think the costs associated is, and I think unpacking those costs is so important when we talk to our partners as well. As there's so many very expensive costs when you land an aircraft, when you park an aircraft, the costs associated with airport offices, the air traffic navigation services, the aviation coordination services charges. They all add up. They may be small, but they all add up. South African weather services. You've got the Airports Company South Africa. Those charges are substantial. The foreign operating permits that we have to do with the Department of Transport, to get aircrafts registered and accredited, and to go through that, labor costs, because we are a people's business. Yes, we're in transport, but we really are about a people's business. And so you need that human element, and all of those costs affect the P&L. And that's, sometimes you look at it and you've generated the revenue, but the costs outweigh the revenue. That's where the challenges arise. So the entire value chain is very costly for airlines. So we need to work with partners and look at cost incentives and value adds that help grow the airline and, look at those routes. And I'll give you an example. I mean, Westgrow in Cape Town is an amazing example of an organization that really works with airlines, and they provide value, they provide incentives, they provide solutions and data, unbelievable data that helps one motivate and substantiate why Cape Town, for example, is a viable route. And KZN also with DB Tradeport, they've always been really proactive, certainly with Mauritius having been in Durban previously for many years, over 3 decades. They worked with Mauritius to provide solutions, because I think Durban in particular, and you made mention, is really challenging in terms of the yield perspective. and sales potential. It really is. So understanding the airline economics, the cost, the potential of the market is critical. So it is a very difficult one to navigate, but I think that if the value chain comes together, and I mean this by government departments and these institutions like Wesgro and Dubai Trade Port that help the airline to say, this is what we'll do from our side to make sure that we do fly to these routes and to help us build. We did some amazing marketing, for example, with Dubai Trade Port, billboards and creating the awareness. So there's a lot of ways and means that you can do that, but by working together, we can certainly expand.
Okay. What then, in your view, is most likely to become the most important hub in sub-Saharan Africa, even in the next 20 years? Will it be OR Tambo? What can government do? You've spoken a bit about that, but maybe you can touch on the benefits of having a hub. What's the benefit to government of protecting OR Tambo's hub status?
So, Sarah, that's been a topic of discussion for a while. There's been a lot of debate. I remember joining the captains of the industry forums from an aviation perspective where we discussed and unpacked. And I think as airlines and in my former role as the chairperson of BASA, that was one of the issues that we used to highlight when we worked through the CAA with the DOT to restart aviation was we're going to lose our hub status. It seems like we're sleeping. We need to reactivate. We need to resuscitate. So we know, and I think the statistics for many years talk to Africa's aviation market being one with huge potential versus other geographic regions around the world, because there's so much opportunity to grow. And I think IATA has also projected, in fact, they have projected that Africa will be the fastest growing region. Repeatedly, they've said this to 2036, with a 5.6% growth per annum and a total market of 400 million passengers annually. So they've specifically provided these numbers, and when you compare it to the other geographic regions with 1 or 2%, you can see that the growth lies in Africa. So it makes sense to look at Africa. And we've heard so many times all the challenges attached to Africa, we know them, but the forecast in terms of passenger traffic is impressive versus other geographic regions. So it makes sense to invest in the continents. The opportunities it brings for those destinations really looking to align themselves as Africa primary aviation hubs is substantial from the statistics there are. And I mean, if we look around the world at cities who've done it really well with hub airports and their economic success, to understand that airport hubs and economies go together with airlines who are economic enablers. For example, London, New York, Istanbul, Dubai, these are all cities that are flourishing with strong economies and major air transport hubs. So we know that that's the secret. And in Africa, these cities are Addis Ababa and Casablanca, for example. So Johannesburg OR Tambo does remain Africa's biggest air transport hub in terms of capacity, handling on average just over 26 million passengers per year. Obviously, this was prior to the COVID pandemic. The numbers obviously have been very different in 2020 and 2021, but historically South Africa has been the economic hub of Africa. However, problems have been mounting, as we know, for the country's challenging economy, but also its flag-carrying airline. I think that's been the big challenge, and I think that poses the biggest threat. So this has created a threat, Johannesburg losing its hub status to airports in East and West Africa. That's, I think, where we're seeing the major competition. And if we look at the stats, it's already happening in Addis Ababa, which accounts for more than 13% growth. And other cities like Casablanca, Nairobi, Marrakesh have also had good positive passenger growths. I was looking at the Forward Keys data because they share a lot of data in this regard, and they were reflecting the exciting growth among other destinations, particularly in East Africa. And also IATA has also made mention recently that they've identified Rwanda as among the top 10 fastest growing air passenger markets in the world. So yes, we really need to devise a strategy. We need to do new ways, as I mentioned, and really have leadership have this as a strategic agenda, and that's the value chain. It's not just for airlines, but it needs to be with Airports Companies South Africa, with the CAA, with the DOT, with all the critical players. They have to look at a hub strategy to protect our hub. And I think they need to also work with the domestic airlines who've been around a long time, who have expertise, experience, and who are very, very willing to assist and work with government to make sure that we protect the hub status.
Thanks, Carla. Lots of work to be done. We look forward to seeing you back in the trenches. Thank you for joining us.